Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we've been looking at how we can solve quadratic equations by, we've already done how to do them by factoring, then we did them by how to do them by graphing. We looked at how those graphs can change. Now we're going to be getting into another process called completing the square. And it's another way to help us solve, excuse me, how to solve quadratic equations. And this works if you have a problem that you can't factor. Okay, so this is another way that we can go about doing it. So completing the square is a process to change a trinomial into a perfect square trinomial. And if you remember, when we have perfect square trinomials, for example, let's say x squared plus 6x plus 9. All right, I'm going to just use that one as an example. We know the leading coefficient and your c both have to be perfect squares, and the middle term has to be 2 times, right, this right here has to be 2 times the square root of a, which is 1, times the square root of c, which is 3. When you do that, this would factor into x plus 3 and x plus 3, right? So you end up with the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at, well, how can I kind of go backwards, and if I have a trinomial or find a missing value of a trinomial to make it a perfect square. And it's a pretty easy process. We're going to take, the first thing we do is we're going to take half of whatever the b term is. So when I'm down here and I'm looking, I'm going to say, okay, I want to figure out what does this have to be in order for you to, turn this into a perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to take, I know b is 4. All right, that's this number right here. I'm going to take half of it. So half of b is going to be 2. Then I'm going to take that and I'm going to square it. So I'm going to take whatever I got here and I'm going to square it. So I'm really going to do half of b squared. Now you don't have to write this all out, I'm just trying to show you where we got those numbers. So if half of b is 2, then 2 squared is 4. Now the only reason these match is because it was a 4, and 2 squared is 4, and 2 plus 2. So that's the only reason that match. It's not going to happen every time or any other time, really. So this then tells you what c has to be. If I filled in a 4 here, this is now going to be a perfect square trinomial. All right, let's try another one. So here I have, and I do include the negative sign with it. So here I know that b is -8. I'm going to take half of it. Half of b is -4. Now I'm going to square it. -4 squared is 16, which is what c has to be. So if I wrote this, 8r plus 16, that is a perfect square trinomial. So it's 2 steps. You take half of it and then you square it. You take half of it and then you square it. Half of b, you square it. Now, in order to solve a quadratic by this method, first of all, you have to get, normally we need one side equal to 0. Well, now we want to get the x squared and the 6x, and we want the constants on the other side. All right, so get constants to one side. We have to do that first. So I'm going to take and subtract the 12, which is going to give me 7 over here. Now what I want to do is I want to turn this into a perfect square trinomial. And just like up in the first 2 examples, I need to figure out what c is. The difference is because this is an equation, whatever I figure out c is and I'm going to write down, I have to also add it to the other side. All right, well, let's go through it step by step. I'm not going to write it all out, though. I'm going to just kind of put it off to the side. So I know b is -6. Half of that is -3. And then I have to square it, which is 9. So the value I need to turn this side into a perfect square trinomial is 9. Okay, that's what I figured out. But because this is an equation, if I change something on one side, this goes back to 7th grade, if I change something on one side, I have to make the same change on the other. So I'm going to add 9 to the other side. Now, I can factor this. This factored is x plus 3 squared equals 16. Now, here's where it gets a little bit different too. I need to now get rid of my squared. Well, to get rid of the squared, we have to take the square root. I could go through and multiply these out and then get one side equal to 0 and factor it, but this is going to be a little bit quicker. So I'm going to take the square root. Well, the square root, these cancel. So I'm going to get x plus 3 equals plus or minus 4. Well, why is it plus or minus? Well, positive 4 times 4 is 16, and negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. So I really have two equations to solve. X plus 3 equals 4, and x plus 3 equals negative 4. Subtract your 3, x equals 1. Subtract your 3, x equals negative 7. So my answer, my solution, is negative 7 and 1. All right, let's take a look at another example. This is going to take a little bit of time, okay? So I have to get my constants to one side, so I'm going to subtract 3. So the problem that I'm working on is x squared minus 12x equals 5. Well, I want to turn this side into a perfect square trinomial. To do that, I have to complete the square. I know that b is negative 12. I have to take half of that, negative 6, and then I'm going to square it. That is 36. So that's going to get added here, and it also has to get added here. So my new problem looks like this. Okay, this can factor, and when I factor it, it's x plus 6 squared equals 41. Now, 41 is not a perfect square, but I can do that in my calculator, and I'm just going to round it to the nearest tenth. So these are going to be approximations. All right, these are going to be approximate. So the square root, square root of 41 is about 6.4, plus or minus 6.4. So now when I set up my equations, x plus 6 equals 6.4, x plus 6 equals minus 6.4. So subtract 6, and I'm going to change these to approximately because we rounded. Minus 6, x is approximately negative 12.4. Okay, so my answers are negative 12.4 and 0.4. Okay, so I know we're going to spend a lot of time practicing it, I promise. Okay, solve this by completing the square. Well, in order to complete the square, the very first term has to be a 1. So the first thing I want to do is I am going to take and divide everything by negative 2. Because I need the leading coefficient to be a 1. So x squared plus 4x plus 9 equals 0. Well, now I'm going to subtract 9. I got to get the constants to the other side. Now I want to turn this into a perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to look at b. b is 4. I need half of that. Half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So my equation is now going to become, I'm going to add it here, and I'm going to add it to the other side. This factors into x plus 2 squared, right? I just take the square root of this last term. That's all I'm doing there. Okay, equals negative 9 plus 4 is 5. Take the square root of both sides. And again, that's going to give me a decimal, and that's okay. 2.2, I'm going to round it to, plus or minus. So now I have two equations to solve. X plus 2 equals 2.2, and x plus 2 equals minus 2.2. Which means x is 0.2 and x is negative 4.2. So those are my solutions, my answers, my x-intercepts, right? If I had graphed that, you would have then had to use your trace button to go down and see about where it was, right? So that's how that works. I would like you guys to try, oops, sorry, wrong way. I would like you to try number 6, okay? So try it. We're gonna do 7 together in class tomorrow, but I would like you guys to try number 6. So I'm gonna stop the video, and when you're ready, you can come back and check to see how you do. Okay, so the first thing I had to do was get my leading coefficient to be a 1, so I had to divide everything by 3. Notice that I divided it by all parts in the problem. Then I had to get my constants to one side, which gave me x squared minus 3x equals 8. Now I needed to go through and take half of my b, which was negative 1.5, squared it 2.25, and I added that to both sides of the problem. Then I factored over here, and again, when you're factoring, it's just the square root of whatever that last term is when you're doing a perfect square trinomial. So x minus 1.5 squared, and then square root of 10.25. Took the square roots, which was plus or minus 3.2, set up my equations, and you should get negative 1.7 and 4.7. So my plan is to spend at least 2 days on this in class. So if you're having some trouble, we're definitely going to work on it. Make sure that you're asking questions, and we're going to save number 7 for class. Any other questions? Bring them with you, and I will see you tomorrow.